here. All right. Hey, Acquira community, our acquisition entrepreneurs. I have Alex and Jeff here. These guys are our preferred legal team that if you end up doing a deal with us, you'll be in touch with at some point. So I just wanted to get them on a quick call here and run through some questions so they could provide a little bit more clarity on how they get involved and what the legal process is to close on one of these business. Welcome, guys. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So I want to turn it over to you guys really quick, just to maybe give a brief bio, kind of background on yourself and how you got involved with Acquira, and then I've got some questions here that we can start to go through.
Yeah, sounds good. So maybe I'll go first, Jeff. Steal the baton from you. But yeah, I met Devin and Amir about 18 months ago, so almost 2 years ago at this point. Memory's a little bit foggy as to when we met, but we bumped into each other in different deals and Kingmaker team members and deals that we've been doing, and we kind of hit it off. And something that I know I've really appreciated about Devin, Amir, and the rest of the Acquira team, right, is the EOS process, that they run internally for themselves, but B, that focus on core values. So it's funny. I've been practicing 8 years. I'm based here in sunny and warm Ann Arbor, Michigan here in February. We have double-digit degrees Fahrenheit, so that's a heat wave for us right now. But we've seen a lot of different people build different law practices, and I know something that resonates with Jeff and certainly resonates with me and resonates with the Acquira group is not working with jerks, basically. And through the process of working with the Acquira team, we've encountered 0 jerks on our side of the fence, and that's super cool. Not the way most people built their law practices. Most people come home and speak to their spouse and talk about how much they hate their clients. Very much not what's been our experience with Acquira. So have been excited to work with AEs, continue to be, and super excited as Acquira grows to work with more, because they're really, it seems like instantaneously there's a personal connection there. Good people helping good people.
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning that, man. I remember talking to you quite a while ago when you were starting to get more involved, and just what was cool is realizing that we had a culture fit and values fit with you guys. It's always neat to see a values fit with even the third-party vendors that you work with. And then it's been a large part of our process, and also the gauntlet, which folks watching this should be really familiar with, is screening folks and making sure they are a culture or values fit before they get into our ecosystem. And it's really just created this neat network of peers and kind of like-minded individuals that get along really well. No jerks. I like the way you put that. So yeah, appreciate you mentioning that. Jeffrey, tell us a little bit about yourself, man.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Jeff Bachman. I've been working with Alex here at Aegis for a while now. He brought me on to help out with these Acquira deals, and I've been practicing law for about 13 years now, and almost exclusively business law, a lot of construction law, M&A, and general corporate. And it's been a really fun experience because we were tag teaming on a lot of these deals where we need to bring in different personality types or different skill sets for different kinds of deals, and we're able to work together really well and really help out these AEs in finishing out this process. And having run my own firm for about 8 years, I truly understand some of the challenges that everyone's facing throughout this process. And I'm down here in sunny Tampa, Florida, home of the Super Bowl champion Buccaneers, and just loving life, and just looking forward to getting some more people on their feet this year and out doing business.
Awesome. We've got plenty. We'll continue to send your way. Awesome, guys. Appreciate the intros. So let's kick off some Q&A here. Folks start to interact with you guys and connect with you guys during the LOI process. So please, could you describe the LOI negotiation process and what all is involved there?
Yeah, I'll lead this one off, Kylan. And yeah, I appreciate what Jeff said too. The types of businesses that we're acquiring, I'm going to say we, because I do feel like it's a team, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Are to the types of businesses that not everyone is interested in, right? These deals are challenging in a good and fun way, and it is about personalities. Jeff and I are a yin and a yang, and I don't know how I feel about the deals that we and Amir and Devin think I'm better suited for and Jeff's better suited for as like the lead blocker, if you will. But we have found like there's very much like, is this an Alex or a Jeff deal? And, Amir or Devin will be like, oh, these guys are really full of themselves. That's an Alex deal. Okay, I don't know why that's the ones that I do, but okay. So we work together as a team on all of them, but Jeff, certainly has resonated with certain personality types too. So the LOI process, it's interesting. It's probably the most critical process. It's easy to say in a linear process, right? The first step is the most important, but it really is, I think, for a couple of reasons. One is that there's not a lot of legal that's going to go on in an LOI. It is a framework for the full definitive agreements, but there's basically only two provisions that are going to be legally binding. Confidentiality, so I'm not going to say that I'm kicking the tires on your business and you're not going to tell anyone else that it's me that's looking. And then exclusivity, which is definitely a hot button topic. So in a larger deal context, and I'll say larger and smaller, and not to diminish the sorts of deals we're doing, it's just to give kind of a sense of what's market, what's standard, okay? In a larger deal, it's kind of a no-brainer. If there's a really interested buyer, we're going to lock ourselves in the LOI to an exclusive period, meaning the seller can't keep shopping and can't, period of 30, 60, 90 days while there's a preliminary diligence going on. And before we move to definitive agreements, we're locked in, right? Before we even lift the pen on the purchase agreement, whether it's a stock purchase or asset purchase. Your mileage may vary on what your seller's expectation is on this front, right? Even though that's what we see generally in the space. We've seen some examples, with AEs where the seller wants to really hold up the buyer for a significant sum just to get the exclusivity with some sort of, concept kind of borrowed from real estate, right? An earnest money deposit, or sometimes a non-refundable deposit, which is, I'm laughing because it's kind of ridiculous. We don't know anything about the company outside of high level. Why would we commit funds? But there are some sellers that have that expectation. So the LOI process can be arduous, or it can be pretty quick. And, besides those two legal points, I would say it really is, it really sets a tone and expectations for how the rest of the deal will go. I can think of some examples right now where we're on, a 10, 11 page LOI. There's more detail there. That means that we have greater guidance in the definitive agreements. It's all good. But we're going to learn more and evolve as diligence continues, right? So too much detail can almost be a bad thing from both the buyer's and seller's perspective. We don't be painted into a corner, or have verbally agreed to something that later we learn something that really changes. So not to say that if it's an arduous LOI process, you're not going to get a deal done. In fact, I think we have a really high batting average in each of these deals because of the gauntlet and because of the investment committee's input, et cetera. But it is, a little bit of a leading indicator, if you will. So again, just to recap, two kind of major legal substantive points: exclusivity and confidentiality. And then the rest isn't window dressing, it's setting expectations for the definitive agreement. But if we agree on a purchase price of $2 million today, we learn that there's some debt in the company that we didn't anticipate or wasn't revealed at that early stage, and the purchase price is adjusted. That's not out of bounds, and it kind of shouldn't be.
Gotcha.
Jeff, what do you think I missed there?
I think you hit on the high points for that, and it's just really the only thing I would add to it is perhaps think of the LOI as a primary communication tool, and you'll hear me say that throughout. Is this really sets the stage for how we're going to discuss and how we're going to work together, because you got a bit of a long road after that, and if you start understanding the personal dynamics at that point, you'll know whether you want to do business with them, because there's going to be some transition following that, and you'll just get a feel for, is this the type of person I want to buy their thing, because this isn't a piece of real estate or a car where there's a clear delineating I buy it, take it home type situation. So that's the only thing I'd probably add on there, Alex.
That's great.
Yeah, I that triggered one more thought for me, Kylan, which is we are here to help the AEs, right? But we are agents, not principals, as in, it really is the AE's responsibility. I'm going to help, Jeff's going to help in whatever way we can. But at the end of the day, it's about the human relationship. If you look me up and read my bio, I say this all the time: 90% human, 10% legal. This LOI stage is where the human relationship is being built between buyer and seller. And so attorneys can muck it up, brokers can muck it up. But at the end of the day, if buyer and seller want to do a deal, you're going to get a deal done, right? The question is just how. So building that trust and that relationship at the LOI stage, is super important, because I can guarantee there will be a point in time in the deal, not because Jeff and I don't do our jobs well, or the seller's attorney doesn't do his or her job well, or the broker doesn't do their job well, but where we counsel the AE, the buyer, you need to call directly the seller and kind of bust through this red tape and get to the heart of the issue, right? Because the two of you have the power to agree. We don't. I don't have the power to agree and bind you, right? I'm just working on your behalf. So I think in probably every deal that we've done with Acquira, and almost every deal I've ever done, you reach that point where there's a few sticking points. We'll arm the AE with the right legal knowledge and some strategy and kind of craft that together. But the baton does get handed to the AE to have that call and work it out with the seller, because that's, to Jeff's point, the long-term relationship that we're building.
Yep, I completely agree. Thanks for bringing that up. But one thing we tell folks all the time coming through our training is that at the end of the day, when you boil business down, it's all about people. All the businesses is just people. So building that kind of relationship, trust, and rapport is key along the entire process with brokers, with sellers, with vendors, etc. So appreciate you bringing that up. Are you guys, just kind of a point of clarity, during that LOI negotiation phase, are you guys involved in also bringing those negotiation terms to the lender for reasonable certainty that we can get the deal funded on those, or is that currently the AE's responsibility?
That's funny, because Jeff and I were having this exact conversation last night, and Jeff said, "Why are you making me think after when I wanted to be done for the day?" And it was literally the text message I got from Jeff. So no, currently that's the AE's responsibility. I think as we evolve, we're all learning, and we're trying to get this process as streamlined. And of course, the humans are going to muck it up because people are people, right? We're trying to get it as streamlined as possible. So, and I think we'll talk more about SBA financing and what those kind of rules are. But at this point, no, we're not the lead, certainly, in that conversation. Again, partially because we're the agents, not the principals, right? So if I reached out to a lender on behalf of an AE, they wouldn't look at me cross-eyed, but they'd say, "Oh, why are you, why isn't the operator, right, reaching out? Because that's a person that we're going to actually fund." So,
I completely agree with that. I think this just goes back to the point that when we work with somebody to buy a business, pre-acquisition or pre-close, we view it as it is your acquisition. At the end of the day, I mean, these guys are here to help and assist and kind of lubricate the process, but you've got to drive that process. You've got to be the principal on it, and then post-acquisition, it's your deal, right? You're the majority owner, operator. So I think that just drives that point home. Any just insight into what the communication cadence with you guys during this stage of the process is like? Emails, calls, the frequency. Have you noticed sort of a trend there that folks could expect, or does it just vary pretty wildly?
Yeah, I mean, it's whatever it takes to get it done.
Yeah.
Right. So sometimes, again, there's lots of drafts of the LOI. Again, my 2 cents, and Jeff, feel free to disagree, right? Because it's an art, not a science. Hopefully we're not trading a lot of drafts of the LOI, and because again, it's not legally binding, and that's not the end goal. The end goal is a purchase agreement. So if we're really kicking the heck out of an LOI back and forth, I don't know how productive that is. I think it's a lot more, verbal, and it really is, the AE and the seller having these conversations. Do you agree, Jeff?
Yeah, I agree with that. And and the caveat is that'll tell you a lot. If we're creating a 20-page LOI, what's the purchase agreement going to look like? Are you going to want to really deal with these people if they're being super unreasonable even at that stage? And it just but it does vary all over the place how fast and how involved it is, for sure.
Yeah, that kind of triggers one other thought, not to cut you off, Colin, which is, we believe, and I think Acquira believes, that, a quick no is a second best answer to yes, right? We don't want to waste your time or resources as an AE, right? Or frankly ours, let's be honest, we've got skin in the game too. We have a limited lifespan here as well, right? If we're, just, circling, right, spiraling with no real end game. So we're not deal killers. It's the last thing that we want to be for sure. But to Jeff's point, we will raise, warning flags for you. Proceed as you wish, right? Again, agents, not principals. But yeah, we do believe that, if it's not the right fit, let's move on to the next thing that is.
That's great. That transparency. I mean, again, it's one of our values. So appreciate you mentioning that. I have another question here. So with the businesses that you have worked on so far, what would be the top 3 to 4 items that you could highlight that could disqualify a deal in these early stages of the process?
Yeah, and I think I'm going to answer that, Kylan. And so, I thought of about 3 or 4 items on this point at this stage, at the early part. And the first 2 I want to talk about are kind of interrelated, and it's transition services and licensing. So we're primarily dealing with roofing, plumbing, and HVAC, typical trades that most jurisdictions have some form of licensing, and that license has to be moved from point A to point B, depending on the nature of the purchase, But really, most times that license is held by the seller or one of the principals of the seller, and we need to attach that. And it's really dependent on how much and how willing they're doing. If you have a seller that's literally wanting to ride off into the sunset 2 days after closing, once the wire comes in, that's not going to be a good sign, because you're going to need them around depending on your jurisdiction, on how difficult the process is to transfer the license, which it typically is not that difficult, but it does involve a lot of involvement from the seller or the qualifying agent. And the same thing with the transition services. We're not buying a car. There's no user manual with these things. They're these amorphous kind of moving pieces that somebody spent a lot of time and effort to create something of value, and we need their help understanding it. And you can do a lot in due diligence, and you can learn a lot in due diligence, but it's not the same as actually getting it on the road.
Right.
When I was in the military, we used to have a term. It was called left seat, right seat drives. So, we would start out riding out in the passenger seat, and then we would switch over at a certain point, once we were comfortable with it, into the driver's seat. But both sides were observing. And then once we felt comfortable, then we're off on our own. And if they're not willing to do kind of a reasonable transition services, that's going to be a key indicator that, okay, either they're hiding something or they're just not going to cooperate and answer questions that are legitimate that you might have. So I would be very, if obviously if they said no transition services, it's just that's an easy no. So to Alex's earlier point, that's an easy no. If they're not willing to do anything about the licensing and you don't have anything available, that's an easy no too, because we need a license to operate this business in probably 90% of these. And then another thing that is really, I think, important and worth educating oneself over is the lender requirements. Vast majority of your SBA deals. And, we, as on our team, obviously we're familiar with the guidelines and requirements. Acquira has a lot of experience with these. This is not their first rodeo for sure, and they can help out. But a lot of these sellers are not familiar with these requirements. So when you go to them and say, hey, listen, I want you to finance 10% of this on a seller note, but you're going to be on standby for 2 to 10 years, until the SBA, the parent loan's paid off, they're going to look at you like you're crazy. Yeah. And, so understanding that requirement and communicating that up front and letting them know, hey, listen, we may get to underwriting, and that lender's going to look at this and say, hey, listen, I need you to change this so it fits our underwriting. And they have to be okay with that and trust you enough that you're not doing this for any other reason than we want to finance this deal, which kind of goes into the last one I want to bring up, which is unreasonable or inexperienced seller counsel. So a lot of these acquisitions are happening in small towns, in various locales all across this great nation of ours, but the seller counsel varies. So it might be somebody's cousin, it might be somebody's friend who is a bankruptcy attorney, it might be somebody who is a personal injury attorney or a general practitioner. And it doesn't mean that they're bad, but they don't understand necessarily what are common points or how to work with the SBA, or they are used to doing things because that's the only way they've done it for 30 years. Right. If you send them a PDF, they don't know what to do. They have to print it out, mark it up with crayon, and then send it back to you. And it makes things very difficult. So if somebody was looking at a deal and they're like, I have this guy who is, I have to use him. He's my seller counsel and he did my wills for the last 30 years. Yeah, that's probably a red flag there for me. Alex, you've been involved much more on the upfront stuff. Is there anything that you think I'm missing there?
No, I think, we obviously workshop these answers together, Jeff. So we're on the same page, but sorry, behind the scenes, there'll be a documentary later that tell all of how we put this together. No, I'm joking. Yeah, I think it's the lender process, right? Because those details are coming together. And again, this is kind of timely. Literally, Jeff and I were talking about this last night. Like, how do we streamline this, right? Because they're moving targets, swim lanes, whatever metaphor you want to use. Right. But you're not going, it would be unreasonable to know everything about the nature of the loan and then begin a diligence process, because you need, right? There's an interactivity here, right? So it's setting the expectations almost, I don't want to say to an absurd level or to an extreme, right? But saying like, look, these are possibilities, seller, right? The standby thing is a great example of, I'm working with the lender, I'm going to tell you what it takes, right? And that's part about building that human relationship. You can set the expectation early that these things might happen and they don't. You have a lender who's more flexible or looks at the SBA guidelines and interprets them in a different way that's better for everyone or more flexible for everyone. Then you set an expectation that was unreasonably pessimistic and you look good, right? And you're like, oh, hey, by the way, remember I said this could be an issue? It's not an issue anymore. So the hard part is they're both moving targets, right? So how your negotiation plays out with the seller is happening at the same time as your negotiation with the lender. So setting those expectations on both sides to say, hey, lender, I'm still learning about this company. Here are the high-level financials. Quality of earnings isn't complete yet. But based on what are we narrowing on our scope of, what the financing terms are, and then vice versa, right? And so that really, the other things are, I'm looking at the list again, right? I think maybe easier to overcome than this if don't set the right expectations. Because otherwise, to Jeff's point, 10, 15, 20%, whatever the number is of the deal value, if you want seller financing, which we all do, why not, right? Yeah. Really gets messed up really fast, and then the seller, feels maybe bait and switch or whatever they feel. Everyone gets to feel whatever they want to feel, right? But then there's an incongruity there. It's like, hey, I want to buy your business, let's get it done. Oh wait, no, here are these onerous terms, and I can't do anything about them, right? That conversation can go off the rails. So, what do you say, Jeff? Fast is smooth and smooth is fast, or you have a
slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
There you go.
That's a military thing too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, military phrase as well. And that's true, right? So setting those expectations early, and asking a little bit for forgiveness, not permission, right? In regards to those is important. Otherwise, you can get that screeching tires or mismatched expectations conversation pretty early on.
Yeah. It always seems to come back to this, it's part art, part science. As you said, a lot of it can be a moving target. You kind of have to feel it out as you go. Another question we had is what are some of the most common reasons for an LOI or an asset purchase agreement failing that you guys have seen? Because we always try to set those expectations with our acquisition entrepreneurs up front, that there's definitely a percentage of deals that fail at some point during LOI APA, and just to be prepared for that, it's not uncommon. What are some of those most common reasons that you guys have seen?
I'll take the first swing at this. I think that bell curve is pretty flat. Like, there's a lot of different reasons, but the common theme is sellers asking for something that's wild. That's the word that I like to use. Wow, that's wild. Like, oh man, who could imagine, right? So we're having a conversation right now with a seller who's like, oh, by the way, I lent the company $140,000 and you should pay it off after closing. That's wild. Okay. The idea is that this is a debt-free, cash-free deal in principle, meaning, what happened before the closing is the seller's issue and benefit, right? They've been earning there. And then what happens after closing is buyers. Now, there's 100 exceptions. That's why we have jobs, Jeff and I, right? But that's the general rule of thumb. So if you lent I don't even know if we have the journal entries in this instance of lending that money, doesn't matter, but there's no way that buyer pays that amount. So you can adjust the purchase price downwards accordingly, right? You can just write it up. There are many different ways to tackle that, but in no way should money from the buyer go to pay this debt of the company. I mean, again, money is fungible, so we can play games to shift it around to make it seem that way if that's what seller wants. So certain red flag things. And again, at that point, agents, not principals. Jeff and I say, as I had said to one of these AEs yesterday or the day before, I won't use his name, right? AE, look, this is insane.
Yeah.
Like, this is really wild. Most sellers are not going to require that. Let's do the math here. We're talking about, whatever percent of the overall deal that like you're totally giving up in a way that is, in my opinion, kind of outrageous, right? So it's things of that nature. I've not personally experienced more than, I can count on one hand the number of times that it really was like misrepresentation or fraud on behalf of the seller, right? But there is sloppiness. And sloppiness doesn't mean, again, misrepresentation, fraud, like willful bad behavior or, obscuring things. But the point of the purchase agreement, and if you, work with us, you'll hear us say this too, risk is not being destroyed or, we're not removing risk from the equation when we do a purchase agreement. We're just shifting it around, right? So the whole conversation is about the existing risk. If you put a number on it, say there's 100 points of risk here in this business. After the closing, we're moving that around. Risk is shifting to the buyer, generally speaking, right? But not all of it. I mean, that's where the nuance comes in again. So, unwillingness to share diligence items is another kind of big red flag. Now, what they are and the timing of that can be malleable, right? So there's certain things that, we will counsel an AE of, that smells, right? I don't know. But then again, it's AE's decision as to whether or not to proceed, right? And what we'll do, even if you use this interest of the $140,000 loan from the seller, right, to the company, if this AE wishes to proceed, we're going to fight like mad to, in some other way, make up that $140,000 in the transaction,
Yep.
right? So we will help you achieve your purpose, but we're not afraid of, and I think this is where, we work well together as in the Acquira team and the Aegis team. We will give you our opinion. And if you don't want our opinion, then don't work with us. Doesn't mean that we won't, march in the beat of your drum, but, we feel we sleep better at night knowing if we're like, oh man, I really don't know about this.
Absolutely.
Like, we'll communicate that, right? We're not going to just, whistle past the graveyard.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate that. Jeff, anything to add there?
Yeah, and it's kind of a common theme of some of the stuff that we're talking about. If we're talking about an APA failing out, we've had a really good percentage so far that hasn't happened, and it's just people skills. And we've talked about managing expectations. We get into these diligence items, and it's a challenge because you're going to a seller and saying, hey, the way you have done it in the last 20 or 30 years in your small town, in your little world, we think that there might be some risk there. And they kind of take it personally. And they, of course, come back and say, there's no risk. The way I've always done it is the correct way. And we can have, everybody has an opinion on that. And like Alex said, it's a matter of shifting that. But then you get to this attitude of, well, the deal changed. This just happened on one I closed last week where along the way, one of the employees gets hurt, and there's this workers' comp claim that's going to basically increase the expenses by $30,000 per year. Which is, it wasn't substantial, but it was not chump change either. And so then they want to start changing the terms because of this changed event, and that was a big reason that because something popped up that people weren't expecting, both buyer and seller. They want to change the deal terms. And at that latest stage, you're going to get a lot of hard feelings. And it's very difficult, and you got to overcome that. And so I think one of the things that Alex hit on that we've been talking about is this managing expectations, communicating, developing that relationship between the seller and the AE that kind of gets rid of that. It's like, okay, I understand this happened, but I'm willing to work with you because I'm going to be here anyways because I have to qualify the license on the business for a while. I'm going to be doing the transition services for a little while. If they're really intent on misrepresenting or committing fraud, they're going to be out quick. If they're really willing to stay on and help, that's a good green flag on the deal. But, I think the other thing that I'd probably add on this on failing out is kind of ambiguous or non-starter issues being discussed or not being discussed at the LOI stage and kind of left to later. Big ones are indemnification, description of the financing contingencies, nature of the note. I had one where they said, hey, it's a secured seller note. It's going to be secured by the assets of the business. Which assets? And we don't need to get super precise, but we did have to have a discussion later, because when the lender decided they didn't want to lien all the assets, that became a problem, because now the seller can't lien all the assets. They can only lien as much and to the extent that the lender does. And, those are the types of things that pop up. But again, I think if you have a good relationship and find somebody that you're willing to work with, a lot of these things go away and we're able to close it out. We bat in a really good percentage right now.
Yeah, I like that we keep coming back to the relationship building here. I mean, just speaking personally, and I've told this story to some of our AEs. I know we had a deal that we closed February of last year, actually. But we had the LOI signed, I think it was 7 months or so prior to closing. Basically, it took 7 months from the LOI to close for a variety of different reasons. The deal just kept getting delayed. We ended up getting a ways down the road with a certain lender. They changed their internal policy, which blew the deal up. We had to start over with another lender. The only thing that held that deal together was the relationship I had built with the seller. We would literally, we'd stay up. I remember at one point we were up at 11 p.m. Pacific time which was 1 a.m. his time on a Friday night, talking about like just life and like his kids and what he was planning to do over the weekend and stuff. We built this relationship to where even through kind of the road bumps, he stuck with it, and then we got the deal done. So that deal just strikes me as one that the only reason it did happen is because that relationship was built, and he really did want to sell to us and work with us. Love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a quick follow-up on that is, like, we're talking to generally smaller businesses. These are generally family-run businesses. These are things that people built. This is a lot of people who are exiting for the retirement. That's one of the cool things that we get to do is, although we're not necessarily representing the seller, we're helping somebody go off and get this reward, and everybody's walking away happy. But there's a lot of personal feelings wrapped up in that. So if you can develop that relationship and learn that and figure out how to make a win-win, I mean, it's a great feeling at the end of the day.
Love it. Okay, this goes back to what we were talking about a little bit earlier, but is your team involved with the SBA and financing of the deal?
You want to take that one first swing at it, Jeff?
Yeah, sure. I mean, yes and no is my answer. Typically, this is going to be on the AE to work back and forth with their lender, because there's a lot of personal financial information that we got to get forth. We got to get life insurance. We got to see if our credit's good, if we need any co-investors. We are generally helping out kind of on the sidelines during that initial process. But the SBA has baseline requirements, and that's kind of one of the things I wanted to talk about was we have to understand that a lender is doing nothing. It's not the SBA loaning the money. It's obviously a particular lender who's approved by the SBA. So the SBA has their baseline requirements, but the lender can add to those requirements based on their underwriting. And that's where it gets kind of wonky. That's a legal term of art for those of you, where you have these various lenders and they're all different. And so we are very familiar with those common terms and requirements for various SBA lenders, but that's where it gets it kind of varies from one to one. And they can oftentimes pop up later in the deal process too, because we may have a loan commitment letter, which is great. That lets us know that this potential transaction is, financeable for the most part, but then it goes to underwriting. And then once they actually see the purchase documents, depending on the lender and their risk tolerances, they may want to have a say in it. And we go back and forth quite a bit with them. So yeah, are we involved? Not necessarily up front. That's something Alex and I have been talking about. Maybe that's part of this education process during that initial period of getting the loan commitment, but definitely later on, we're back and forth with the SBA lender a lot. And we're even closing some of the deals on behalf of our clients and the parties. So
that's great. Yeah, that's great. Up front earlier in the process, I know we have systems and folks that can help people as well. Definitely one of the things we suggest is building a relationship with multiple lenders and working in tandem with multiple lenders up to a certain point. Perhaps during that kind of pre-LOI negotiation phase and up to the point of getting a term sheet, and get term sheets from multiple lenders, and then pick which one is going to best suit your needs and kind of meet the terms of the deal you're negotiating on. And then if something happens, again, my earlier story, we luckily when this deal blew up because of a change in the lender's internal policies, we were able to switch to another lender pretty easily that we'd already been working with a bit and already knew about the deal. So we definitely suggest that to folks as well, because I think that the punchline there is every lender does approach it a little bit differently. Every underwriter thinks about it differently as well.
Yeah, and it's worthwhile to get educated about. We've had a recent change with some of the stimulus bills where they're starting to waive the guarantee fees for the SBA, which, the last deal I did, that was about $33,000. That's great. But also understanding and getting that relationship with the lender, because our client was a purchaser. They thought they were going to get an extra $33,000 in working capital, and they just simply took it all off. It wasn't the end of the world, but like being knowledgeable in that process, it takes a little bit. And so we're trying to help out a little bit more on the upfront, on the education piece, so that we understand this later on as it gets to underwriting.
Yep, that's great. Cool. Would love to transition now to just discussing more about how folks actually engage with you guys. Maybe we can reiterate when in the process they connect with you, and then what does that actually look like? What types of agreements do they need to sign with you, and what, the big question, what do you guys actually charge, and what does that look like?
Well, Jeff's time's free. He does donate and help. He's a very charitable guy, and I've doubled my rates. That's the no. So kind of three questions in one, right? And Jeff and I can tag team it. But basically, the pre-LOI stage, that's about education. That's why we're doing this. And certainly, Acquira and we are working to disseminate information better, like at a high level, right? Again, pre-LOI is really early stage, and so that's, if I'm, Kylan, correct me if I'm wrong, that's prior to the investment committee. So I don't think that there's not really a formal role for us there, right? I mean, we'll be available to answer questions. I think we'll do more of these, or maybe all those things to come, right? More to come there. But from a formal, like one-on-one, we're engaged and working with you, I don't think that there is a there at the pre-LOI stage. However, passes through investment committee, and now we are talking about an LOI, that's absolutely the right time to get in touch. And so basically, there's really only one thing that we need to do. We as in Aegis, the law firm, and you as an AE, which is sign an engagement letter, which sets out lots of fun legal boilerplate about how we work together and so on and so forth. There is a twist there for sure, which is we have a conflicted interest, right, given our nature of our relationship with Acquira. So there will be language at the end of that purchase agreement, which Acquira will sign as well. Devin usually signs on behalf of Acquira, that says, look, Aegis does represent Acquira in other lanes, and the nature of our relationship with you, the human, the AE, is actually none. It's with the acquisition entity. So if there is a point in time where, God forbid, we've not seen this yet, of course, Acquira and the AE has some sort of dispute, or there's some internal, right, I'll just call it jockeying for lack of a better term, we're not involved. I mean, Jeff and I disappear ourselves and say, oh, you know what, we're on both sides of the fence here, that's no good. Here we can recommend some other people that can help you, right? Outside of our firm, of course, right? But we're setting our hair on fire and running away, right? This is not fair to anybody. So if we sign that engagement letter, we're good to go. I think that shifts to the economics, but it's a pretty painless process, and same business day for sure, right? We can get up and running and start to look at an LOI. And then, awesome. And maybe, Jeff, we can tag team. So, okay, the $1 million question is, the fee is $1 million. No, I'm kidding. The $1 million question is, what is our fees, right? And so we worked really hard with Kylan, Dimitri, Amir over the last few weeks to decide how we're going to tackle this. So, again, in the spirit of full transparency, right? Jeff and I bill out at $300 an hour. That's our full freight, quote unquote, normal rate, right? We found that there is a rinse wash repeat here for us, right? We're seeing these more and more. We're becoming more efficient. And also, we understand as an operator, okay, $300 an hour, that sounds great. I'm in San Francisco, people charge $900 an hour, $700 an hour. We're both much more reasonable than the terms.
Yeah, I was going to mention that's really reasonable. Guys.
No, but there's still, but how long is it going to take? Is it going to take 7 months? How many times? We just did a deal, Jeff, where we did a purchase agreement. We thought it was 70-80% of the way there, and seller's counsel's like, oh, forget about it. I want to use my form. Hold on, we're like 2 weeks from closing here, buddy. Like, well, what's going on? So there's, we sympathize, and then, in our other hats that both Jeff and I wear, empathize with, what's the yaw there on these fees, right? It's not putting more money in my pocket, it's taking money out, right? So we've come up with a flat fee structure for these deals, and there's, kind of 2 buckets, a deal that's less than $1 million or a deal that's more than $1 million, right? Of course, you have to give lawyer caveat. There's always something different. If you approach us with a $50 million acquisition, that might be different. But we're assuming some familiarity or similarity here, right? So for a deal of greater than $1 million, we're charging a $20,000 flat fee. What that looks like is a $2,000 retainer, which goes into trust when we start to negotiate the LOI. We do this for a couple reasons. One is there'll be some filing expenses that we don't want to come out of pocket for, no offense, right? And number 2, it does show some seriousness of commitment. Of course, we know you've gone through the gauntlet, you're in it to win it, but again, you're new to us, so that's part of the deal, right? What we'll do throughout the process, including in the LOI stage, is bill our time. And by that, I mean that $300 an hour rate, we will be tracking that. That's because what happens if a deal falls apart and we've, again, agreed on this flat rate, what we'll do is take half the fees that have been accrued up to that point in time. So super easy math, 3 hours of effort was put in, that's $900, right, at $300 an hour, but the deal falls apart. Oh my gosh, can I do 900 divided by 2? Yes, I can, $450. We're done, we're clean, right? And again, we wanted to keep this simple and not have the, oh crap, what's the bill going to be, moment, right, for the AEs. If the deal is less than $1 million, that fee drops down to $15,000 and a $1,000 retainer. Again, if there's breakage, we're going to, have that rate of the real actual time that we've spent. So what you can expect is we close the deal, within a business day or 2 of the closing, we hope to be paid, given this has all been orchestrated. Congratulations, we're successful. And you will see that time there, right? So you'll have a little bit of, it's not just, here's your blank check bill for that amount. You'll see it. And, of course, the effective rate, if it ends up being exactly $100 an hour, that would be a 1 in a million shot, right? It might actually be a little higher or a little bit lower. But again, when working with Acquira, we thought that cost certainty is a lot better. And frankly, from my perspective, I like flat fees because you're not scared to call us, right? I've not experienced that with any AEs, probably because of the great filtering process that Acquira is doing. But the last thing we want there to be is a disincentive for you to work with us and for us to help you, right? And so that's part of the reason why we kind of adopted this model. Jeff, did I miss any detail there?
Yeah, I don't know that you missed any detail. It's just more of something I wanted to add is like this structure and what we've done, it really incentivizes us to help you get this deal made. I mean, I can sit here and talk on the phone with some seller's counsel for hours and hours and hours and knowing the deal's never going to close, and I get paid by the hour, and that's great, and we just sit here and churn, and that's not our style. That's not the way Alex and I work ever. And at the same time, we have a little backstop where we'll take a haircut. We're going to take 50%, which is a substantial haircut for us. But that also, I always felt good about that because I don't want to talk anyone into a deal they shouldn't. So if we get to a later stage and something pops up, we obviously people are coming to us for advice, and I want them to be able to trust that, I'm not buying something that I shouldn't. That these people have my best interest at heart, and we're not, so they want to see it close, but obviously they're gonna take a hit too if this doesn't walk. If we walk away, and it's probably if they're telling me to walk away, I should be walking away, which hasn't happened yet. Gotten close, but it hasn't happened. We've been able to work a way around it. So, I just like having that warm fuzzy at the end. It makes me feel good. I know Alex feels good about it, and it's just how can we get some cost certainty and make a win-win situation? And this has worked out really well so far.
Yeah, we feel great about it, guys. And the AEs that have already worked with you have nothing but good things to say. I think it's very reasonable. You guys are very transparent. I love the alignment of incentives here. Have to shout out to you guys too for other work that you do with us at Acquira, Kingmaker, some of our other subsidiaries. We've been working with you guys for a while, and just again, it's always been such a joy. So I appreciate that. We could wrap up now. I might turn it over to you guys if you have any parting advice or last words you want to say before we close out.
You got anything, Jeff?
Yeah, it's one thing is really get a understanding of yourself and your risk tolerance. A lot of the AEs that we've worked with, they come from a variety of backgrounds, which is really awesome. Yeah. And most of them are experienced in whatever industry they're at, and they're super smart and intelligent. But then when you're buying this thing that is yours, you have to really understand your personal nature and your risk tolerance, because that's most of what being an entrepreneur is like, am I willing to take on X in exchange for Y return? And really understanding that, because when these things pop up, you have to say, okay, am I willing to deal with this? And because it happens every single deal, it happens every single due diligence period. There's some thing, that's not necessarily a deal killer, but it's some risk. And I think if you have a good understanding of yourself and your personal tolerances, it'll really help you in this process and make it a lot more fun.
Love it.
I don't think I can do better than that, but yeah, I would agree. And I would say, there's some of these acquisition multiples. Like Jeff and I say, can we take this one? We'd like to get this one, right? This is really good. I'm not saying that that's fool's gold. Far from it, right? But there's a reason. I'm not trying to be negative Nancy, right? But there's a reason why we are who we are, as in everyone on this call and watching this call, right? Not Jeff and myself, right? It's because you're willing to go through a journey that's going to be a little bit more, I wouldn't say more or less arduous than, a bigger deal with more zeros and more people in suits with ties on, right? But a little bit wilder ride because we're going to have some personalities. I guarantee you there will be personalities involved in this deal. Yours may be, one of the inputs, right? Which is all good and fun. And like, that's, they can put cliches in here, but I won't, right? So that's a part of this. It's a feature, not a bug, of this process and the types of deals that we collectively as a group are going after. So not saying buckle up, it's going to be a wild ride, hold on tight. It will be to some extent. You'll probably feel like that at some times, but more just, that's part of the game, right? And that probably will continue to be when you're operating it for a period of time until you've seen the movie once or twice, or it's been a couple of years, right? So again, not trying to dissuade. I think those things are fun and interesting, and I think the human element is so much more interesting than the legal element, right? That's why I think we've all found ourselves in this moment. But that is part of it, right? It's not just numbers on a spreadsheet. And certainly, Jeff, lately we've been looking at a couple of businesses outside of roofing, HVAC, plumbing, and like, really that one? Like, is this really what this guy wants to do, right? In a particular AE, and we had that conversation. The answer was yes. Okay. I'm just double checking, right? As a human gut check. It's not legal. Yeah. That's, more just, are you sure you want to live in those shoes, right? I'm looking at the numbers too, and my eyes are bugging out of my head, right? But is that the sort of thing you want to do? And the answer was yes. I said, okay, all right, we'll help facilitate that. No problem.
I love that, man. I mean, part of our internal culture at Acquira, just our team, like our leadership team, for example, is a culture of what we like to call respectful disagreeability, but just kind of constantly asking each other those types of tough questions and trying to poke holes in maybe different ideas folks bring to the table, and just make sure, and that way, sort of the best intentions and ideas always sort of boil to the top, and that's what we act on. We don't want to live in an echo chamber where everybody's just a yes man, and so I appreciate that as well. So awesome. That was some great closing advice, guys. Appreciate your time and you being on the call. We'll send more folks your way, and we'll cut it there.
Great. Thanks for your time.
Cool. Yeah, we'll do a little bit of editing on this and cut it off, but I appreciate it, guys. That you guys really do go above and beyond. I feel like you're definitely not the typical kind of legal counsel that folks encounter, that I've encountered.
The robot lawyers.
Right.
They're everywhere.
That's the early mornings for us when we're processing NDA.
Right. Yeah, right. You have that muscle.
It's good. Yeah, it's good to see you guys in person too. We've just kind of talked over the phone and stuff. So. Yeah,
totally. Well, let us know what else we can do to help. Right. I love the idea of fielding questions periodically, right? I know we talked about that a little bit. So we're around, I know Jeff and I are both keen to, I mean, like this, if you think we're doing you a favor, like this is going to be so huge because AEs are going to understand, 45 minutes of the hand holding. How does this work that we've been doing one notch by one, right? We can even just, hey, in anticipation of our call, AE, like go check out, here's the link, right? Like go check that out. If you got the time to watch that prior, and then like they'll have questions, but doesn't need to be explained, each time. You guys are really on to something for sure. There's tons of these businesses. They are goofy. Like it's a pretty defensible, right? Like Amazon stores, I know that's, the evolution of kingmakers, right? And e-commerce, right? They got undefensible fast. And this is highly defensible because no one wants to do this. No one wants to deal with these problems. I mean, I like them personally, right? But you can't scale it but for brick by brick, right? And most people look at that and go, I mean, Black Rocks, whatever. Like someone's going to fire a money cannon at this. Like, I'm not going to do it. It doesn't scale fast enough.
Mm-hmm. I'm seeing interest in it. I was joking with Alex. Like, I actually closed a deal last week that should have been an Acquira deal. But I mean, it was everything. It was all the markers. It just came to us separately. Last June. It took 8 months, but I don't even think I was working with Kingmakers then, huh, Alex? Probably not, or maybe I was just starting. But the guy bought a plumbing business for $1.5 million, and I'm sitting there like all the little lessons along the way. On the last couple deals, I'm like, here we go. I just watched it flow, and I'm like, it's a very kind of narrow lane that's going to allow us to really get efficient with this, and I'm actually excited. I'm a process person, so I those things are going to make a lot of fun. So
yeah, because of that, you'll continue to fit in well with our team too. We're big into systems and frameworks. That's where we've found a lot of our success here is just creating this sort of acquisition in a box type environment that kind of streamlines the whole process and gives people the tools and resources and knowledge vendors, that whole sort of database that they need. And it's a real network effect. We've noticed the more folks we work with, like you guys, the more AEs we work with, the more deals we close, the more best practices we're sort of gathering. And then what we excel at is turning those into process and different frameworks that are then, sent out and kind of promoted to folks, and everybody gets to benefit from it. So it's been a lot of fun. So I appreciate you guys. I'll let you know when this is out and shoot you a copy. And then, I think in the future, you can expect us to reach out. We now have weekly group calls with folks they're past the gauntlet. They're in various stages of either sourcing deals or, getting close to LOI or having already brought deals to the investment committee. And, we have like 15 to 20 folks on a call every week now, just discussing this stuff. And we like to have a guest every once in a while show up for 30 minutes. So.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And Alex and I have been kicking around. We're starting to shoot some videos, some educational videos on various things, whether it's pre-acquisition or post-acquisition. It's just a resource for them. It's like, hey, I saw this stuff. I got to ask a couple questions, but like, what's the deep dive into baskets and caps and indemnification limits and all this stuff? And like, it's just a resource. So, frankly, if they want to use it, that's great. Just make a tool for them because it doesn't exist.
Yep.
Not on this scale. You can go listen to somebody yabber for an hour on, a $100 million deal, but not at these, at this scale. And it's just as important, and frankly, probably more important.
Yeah.
You guys get any content out like that, we can push it out to thousands of folks. We'd love to do that.
Yeah.
So just let us know.
That's why I bought a ring light, so I look better.
And the green screen, man.
Yeah, I know. Well, I was disappointed. I was like, I wasn't expecting Skype. I'll figure it out. I just downloaded the thing so I can put my backdrop up. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get to it if you guys stop sending us so much work. That's the problem. Yeah, keep them coming.
Will do, guys. All right, I'll let you guys go again. Appreciate the time, and I'll be in touch.
No problem. Take it easy, Kyler.
Thanks, man.
Take care, guys.
Bye.